care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. I'm your host, Laura Babcock, and we've got a great guest today on the pod. They are fighting Premier Doug Ford in his attempts to take Ontario Place and turn it into a spa in a 95-year secret deal that's costing taxpayers upwards of $1 billion. The thing stinks, and we're going to talk to our guest about what might be happening and an AG special report that may come out and hopefully, in my opinion, blow the deal sky high. Also coming up on the pod, we have Gil Panalosa next week. He's traveling the world right now, but the International Urban Planner is going to be on the show. We'll talk all things planning and housing and also about Ontario Place. Gil's a great conversation, very inspiring. Can't wait to talk to him. Just before we get into the conversation around Ontario Place, I want to address some comments that Premier Doug Ford made. He made the comments just before the Trump verdict came out, and so I think a lot of headlines moved off of his comments into the conviction of Donald Trump. But we can't forget what he said. He was at an announcement with Justin Trudeau and Mayor Olivia Chow and decided to weigh in on the shootings at the Jewish schools in Toronto, shootings that we should all condemn. But instead of just condemning them, the Premier went further and blamed it on immigrants and said that they bring things from other countries and terrorize neighborhoods. That kind of xenophobic language is the stuff that Donald Trump uses. It's almost exactly the language that he uses and used right after he came out of court. He started to blame immigrants and what they bring to America. That putrid kind of commentary, that xenophobic, that racist dog whistling is what grows the seeds of fascism. We cannot just let it go by. The Premier obviously heard from a lot of people immediately and tried to walk it back, but he never denounced his comments. He never said that what he said was wrong without evidence and scapegoated thousands and thousands of people who are just coming to Ontario to try to build a better life for their families. So shame on the Premier. You can be critical of the immigration system and the lack of supports, and you can blame Justin Trudeau for that, but you can't blame immigrants for things they haven't done. It's completely irresponsible and below his office, and he should be ashamed and fully take them back. Okay, let's get into the fight for Ontario Place. Welcome to the Oshow, Norm de Pasquale. And Norm, I have followed what you and your pals have been doing for months and months at Ontario Place. And I got to say off the top, for people who haven't been paying attention, you guys have been taking the fight to the Ford government at every turn and got in the New York Times, like quite a spread this past weekend, which is a huge deal. So just off the top, congratulations. But can you tell me, like, who is behind your group? Like, is it a few mighty? Are you guys lawyers? Like, how do you have the ability to take on a premier, protect a public asset, and get in the New York Times?
Well, we are, thanks, Laura. And first of all, I just want to say thank you. And thank you so much for your support over the months. We really, really appreciate it. You've been awesome. So I just want to say that Ontario Place for All, we're a grassroots group of waterfront fighters. We've been fighting for the waterfront for over a decade. I was chair of No Jets TO. We stopped the jets at the island airport. And, we just care so much about the waterfront as just regular folks who, either live around it or just care deeply about the waterfront, that we will fight for it tooth and nail, against people who are trying to privatize it, in this case, for the next 95 years. Yeah. There are architects in our group who are very concerned. We do have a person or two that have lawyer experience. And then there are just people who are really passionate about the waterfront like me.
Yeah. Well, I saw one of the pictures that the New York Times took was, I guess, the people who swim in the waterfront, doing their protest, which of course makes for great media. So it seems to me, Norm, like you've got some media comms chops on your team as well, because that's a pretty big coup. So what was the response? I saw that you were trending on Twitter when that came out. What was the response from people in Toronto who thought maybe you'd lost this fight, perhaps, and then to see the New York Times pick it up?
Yeah, it was really great to see it back on the radar in such a big way. We actually spoke with the New York Times reporter, and he actually did his work back in December And we took him on a tour of West Island back when it was open, and it was the most amazing tour. So we took him down to the beach, which is a pebble beach on West Island, and there were people swimming there in December,
Nice.
like a big group of people. So between that and he had a great conversation with them, and I'm sure that's how they got into the article. And he got to meet the MPP Chris Glover and just a bunch of people who were out just enjoying Ontario Place as a place for their mental health and wellness. It was a great day. And I'm just so pleased to see the New York Times article come out. And it joins kind of the international attention and condemnation that we've seen around the private mega spa that's happening at Ontario Place.
Well, it's interesting because I have coming up on the Oshow next week, Gil Penalosa, and I'm going to be talking to Gil about urban planning generally. He's an international expert. So I haven't really talked to him or looked at what he said about Ontario Place. So it'll be interesting to get his opinion on it from his lens. But
yeah, I'll tell you just quickly about Gil.
Sure.
At one point, the Ontario government set up a fence blocking access from West Island to Trillium Park, and it just came up one day without any notice. So we were there setting up a rally, and who comes jogging along? Gil Penalosa. He's stunned that there's this new fence that was unannounced that totally blocked access, and he's been a great ally and supporter of.
Has he? Okay, wonderful. Well, I assumed he had, but I was going to wait to ask him. But no, that's great. So I understand that during the negotiation that Olivia Chow was having with Ford, the mayor of Toronto was having with Ford, for those of our viewers around the world and who don't live in Ontario, and she kind of got him by the wallet, got a lot of money out of him, especially stuff for affordable housing and for homelessness, which we're passionate about here on the pod. But it seemed as though part of that negotiation may have been making it a little easier for Ford to take Ontario Place. And I saw that your group just put out a press release about the MZO, the planning going forward, how they're trying to seize those city lands. So sort of where is the politics around this now, Norm? I know you seem like an optimist, but is Olivia Chow fighting for Ontario Place like she was during the election? Do you feel as though, that you don't have as many allies in the city now? Like, how do you read the room?
Yeah, I would say Olivia Chow is still a supporter of an Ontario Place for All, and she was featured pretty prominently in the New York Times article. What happened in December? Yeah, we are a little disappointed that the city isn't fighting as hard as it could to save Ontario Place. But they did not give up the city land or give up the city planning process. They forced the Ontario government to steal that city land and give it to the private mega spa for 95 years. And they forced the province to short circuit the development planning application, which was an awesome process. City staff was doing a great job. They were actually consulting Torontonians. It's what I would have loved to see the province of Ontario actually do here. But unfortunately, the province has moved on and just taken away the land, the planning process, and all of our rights and acts that are meant to protect Ontarians. They've removed the Environmental Assessment Act, Planning Act, Environmental Bill of Rights. It's all been stripped from Ontario Place, and I just worry about the future of the rest of our public institutions.
Yeah, and of our public green spaces. I've had a number of shows on the Greenbelt scandal, of course, and I've had city councilors on and other people, and the conversation has been around the behind the scenes, taking apart the ability to fight back and protect, whether it's public lands or public places. So let's talk, since you mentioned public places, Ontario Science Centre. Isn't that something else? Didn't Ford essentially hand that over to one of his close allies, and isn't that also in peril?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many impacts on Ontario Science Centre. So they're talking about demolishing the Ontario Science Centre where it is now, and then sending a diminished one to Ontario Place at a cost of $400 million. And the Auditor General said it is directly so that they can justify the underground underwater parking lot that costs taxpayers $450 million. So they're moving the Science Center to which is a terrible decision, to justify another terrible decision, which is this underground underwater parking lot. And, we're starting to get up to a taxpayer expense of over $1 billion to pay for a private mega spa. Doesn't Ontario have other priorities right now?
It makes me bananas. Because what really got to me, I'm not going to pretend I was a super fan of Ontario Place or I went all the time. I've been to the Science Center a few times, been to the island a couple times. But what ground my gears was the idea of spending our tax dollars at a time when we have our hospitals in crisis, ERs closing, rampant homelessness, no place for people coming to our communities to live, no primary care attachment. I mean, it is a state of affairs in Ontario, the worst that I can ever recall. And to be spending money on a 600,000, $500 million underwater parking a lot, to me, that was so counterintuitive to good planning, to good use of waterfront. It seemed archaic and car centric in a city that's moving away from all of that. And I thought, what spa needs that much parking, which made me think, well, this is just a casino in spa's clothing because we can't see the 95-year secret deal. So, I mean, just the brazenness of that much of our tax dollars at a time when Ontario can't afford it. Doug Ford is expensive, people, if you're not paying attention, between this and the Staples deal and the booze deal, where he's trying to get that going faster so he can get into an early election. Doug Ford is too expensive for Ontario. And his priorities are not where the people want the priorities to be. So that's what got me so outraged about Ontario Place, was that stupid underwater parking law. Like, how ridiculous. But also, I really believe that there is a potential casino in the works. Why can't we see this 95-year deal? How could a spa possibly need that kind of parking?
Yeah, like when we talk about a 95-year lease to a private company who's been around for less than a decade and maybe has a spa or two to show for it, like this is not the type of organization you sign a deal with for 95 years. Like 95-year leases are usually reserved for like public institutions like Harbourfront Center or, the Ontario Science Center. Like those make sense. They're going to be around. How do we know if a spa company is going to be around for another 3 years? What if this is a passing fad? Like, what if it doesn't land in North America? Then what happens to all of this money that we've sunk into that location? Now we need to justify that money that was spent at Ontario Place. And well, looky here, maybe we have a casino that helps to justify this massive outlay of taxpayer money. So we really worry about that. And the province has admitted if Therme goes bankrupt, it goes back to the province and they try to find another tenant. And what kind of tenant would take that sort of a space? A casino makes a lot of sense.
And there's been a dream to have one on the waterfront in Toronto for a long time, and it's been a battle.
Yeah.
Because those of us who oppose casinos, especially in urban centers, is because of what they do to people who don't have money, right? Some people might enjoy them for sport, but I personally think that they are predatory and that they lead to addiction, and they often lead to more crime, and they lead to preying on the most vulnerable populations. And, it's a whole load of pain that we don't need in a city like Toronto, and not on our waterfront. So I have my concerns about that, and Monty McNaughton moving over to gaming and all the rest of it, and Ford's push for all this online gaming. I feel like Ontario, honestly, has been just a place for gambling and drinking. Like, nothing else seems to be a priority for this government. But back to Ontario Place. I mean, that now that you map it out like that, it does seem logical. Why build a mega parking lot? Why hand over so much to Olivia Chow in a negotiation if you don't really, really need those lands because you really, really have big plans? And I can't imagine that a lot of people are going to make money off of a spa deal with an Austrian company like they would off of a casino and all of the businesses that generates. So, I mean, without being conspiratorial, just looking at the facts as we have them in front of us, this whole mega spa no one wants, no one can afford, that the taxpayers can't possibly put money into, given all the other crisis in this province, it doesn't make sense. And to have Kinga so directly involved in it, like all of it, and moving the science center to justify that parking lot, the whole thing feels like a sketchy scheme to me.
Yeah, it's extremely strange how this government is so laser focused on this mega spot over every other priority. Like I heard the negotiation between the city and the province. The only thing the province kept bringing up was Ontario Place, Ontario Place, Ontario Place. You give us Ontario Place, we'll give you this. And I just can't believe that is like the key priority for this government as our healthcare crumbles, our education crumbles, as people are, set up in encampments around this province and are just getting increasingly desperate. How can this be the number one priority of this province? Right now we are actually suing the government to get them to actually do an environmental assessment of West Island because they are going to obliterate West Island. All 840 trees, all vegetation, lake fill all around West Island for like a sliver of public space. And they have high-priced lawyers up against us. They are sparing no expense to make Ontario Place move forward, like legislative time. If you tallied it all up, I don't even know what number you would end up at. Why is this such a priority for the province? It just doesn't add up to me at all.
Yeah, I mean, if there's not money coming from gaming, I can't figure out the math, or or the parking, the need for that kind of parking structure, and all of it doesn't make sense. But yet, as you just mentioned, those high-priced lawyers that are coming up against your group, they are lawyers we're paying for.
Yeah.
Like Doug Ford is not. This is not his personal investment. Him and Kinga, right? We're paying for the environmental degradation, losing those trees. We are paying for the poor urban planning, some of the visuals that we've seen. And you mentioned with Gil coming by on that little path when they put that fence up. We're paying for the lawyers on this. I mean, and now we're paying for the humiliation. I mean, it looked ridiculous in the New York Times that Toronto is going to do this with their waterfront. So given that you've got all these obstacles against you, Norm, and your group, and that they're using our money to fund the opposition to your efforts, how hopeful are you that you're going to be able to stop this, or at least expose this deal and what the true intentions are?
Yeah, and you've rightly caught that I'm an eternal optimist. So our court case, we're awaiting a decision, and we'll see if that moves forward. And they haven't touched any of the trees on West Island, I think, awaiting that decision. And the Auditor General has a report, which we think is a special report that's coming, laser focused on Ontario Place. They are collecting information from our group, other groups, and I really hope that they're going to get to the bottom of a lot of things, including what was a rigged bid at the beginning that completely favored Therme. Really, this was just kind of gift wrapped to Therme, despite 35 other bidders, and some of them actually offering to pay for the whole thing. So it's just confounding to me how it ended up with Therme being the winning bidder here. So I really hope the Auditor General gets to the bottom of everything in this process right from the beginning. The whole thing stinks from beginning to end. Like a former staffer of his is now a vice president over at Therme. And he's been put onto the board of TVO as well.
Right.
So when they did an episode with the agenda, they actually had to say at the beginning, sort of mention the conflict, which was that they have a Therme person on the board of TVO. So the tendrils are everywhere, unfortunately, on this government, and the corruption is just spreading across the province in many sort of terrible ways.
Well, you know what? Well said. I hate the image, but I think it's an accurate one. Same names keep coming up in the Greenbelt and in Ontario Place, and all of the shadiness and the business cases that don't make sense. I mean, I'm no economist, but I ran a Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years in Oakville, and basic business 101 doesn't seem to matter to this government. They can't explain the profit incentive on anything they're doing. Like, I don't mind if government doesn't make a profit. I don't think it has to be in the for-profit business. It just has to, balance the budgets and take the taxes and build the roads and stuff. But if they are talking about things being profitable or being a good business deal, and then the numbers don't make any sense, it's maddening. Like, it's maddening to watch as an Ontarian who's paying for it. It's like, how is this an investment? Who is this Therme group? Why did they get, as you say, almost feels it wasn't a sole source contract, but it seems like it was custom built for them when their value proposition wasn't as good as some of the other people who were bidding on the project. So what is happening? I'm glad that you're on it. We don't have all the answers here on the Oshow, but AG, come on. Do we have a sense of the timeline on that, Norm, when the AG's report might drop?
We have an impression that it's a special report, so that's good news. That means we won't have to wait all the way to December. But we really hope that as soon as possible. We need that Auditor General report yesterday because West Island is an imminent threat of being completely obliterated and turned into essentially a mud ball. This was like a public space that was designed by like one of our most forefront landscape architects, Michael Huff. And it is a beautiful place. And, I would see people going jogging and cycling and doing yoga there every day. And to me, that's what looks like wellness. So
Yeah,
It's worth
well,
fighting for.
the idea that they're going to cut down trees to put a virtual tree experience inside of this spa is insanity. And when you add to the idea that they are literally paving paradise to create this kind of paid experience of paradise, and part of the justification I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Norm, but is this true or is this just make believe on the interwebs that they said that it was so that people who don't have access to a cottage have access to the great outdoors, but yet they had free access to the great outdoors, the actual great outdoors already.
And that was the most ironic comment on the planet, because when Premier Bill Davis launched Ontario Place, he said, I want this to be a cottage for all Ontarians who can't afford one, to be their backyard, a place that celebrates and reflects Ontario. So, and he also said public interest, not commercial interest, must drive the vision of Ontario Place. I just wish this government would listen to Bill Davis because he had it right. And we are wrecking a place that was great for people's wellness to put up a pay-to-play place that only some people can afford, and it's just completely contrary to the vision of Ontario Place.
And what will they be paying for to play? Will it be for massages and thermal spa experiences? Or will it be for casinos and for gaming tables? And you know what? I think it's a fair question that has to keep being asked of this government until we see the terms of that deal, or they make the numbers make sense, right? Because right now, by any estimation, anyone who's looked at this from any lens, it doesn't make sense. Whether you're a diehard environmentalist or a diehard harbor enthusiast or Ontario Place supporter, this deal doesn't make sense for the taxpayers of Ontario, especially not at a time when the actual state of the province, what's happening here is not good if you're not a wealthy pal of the Premier. So thank you so much, Norm, for you and your group. How can people support your ongoing fight and pushing for the AG report to come out as fast as possible?
Yeah, please go to ontarioplaceforall.com, go to take action. There's lots of actions you can take there, from calling your MPP to printing out an Ontario Place for All sign. Come and support us. Subscribe to our newsletter. We promise not to mail you too much, but we got lots of great action updates. Visit ontarioplaceforall.com.
And I'm hearing a lot of Therme ads, right? So they are clearly on offense with this because they know that they need to now fight for this. So that's a good sign. It says that what you're doing has momentum and is having an impact. And so we'll keep pushing here on the Oshow to see that AG special report, because you know what, the last AG report that came out did a hell of a slowdown to the greenbelt exploitation. So maybe there can be some impact with that as well. Thank you so much, Norm, to all of you, and for all of you who are listening to this pod and watching it around the world. We appreciate it. Check out the New York Times coverage online of Ontario Place, and let's keep this story going. Somehow this government has to be in check for these deals that they're making with our money and without transparency and accountability. Thanks so much, Norman. Thank you for watching the Oshow.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow, Oshow.
Your merch bin.